Welcome back to True Hollywood Stories, everyone. Don't forget to comment where you're watching from today. What you're about to witness is a story that sends chills down the spine of anyone who's ever dreamed of making it in Hollywood. A story about power, abuse, and one superstar's refusal to stay silent. When an aspiring young actress walked into what she thought was a regular audition, she had no idea she was about to encounter both the darkest and brightest sides of Hollywood, and how Scarlett Johansson would become her unexpected champion in a moment that would change the industry forever. Picture this: a sunny morning in Los Angeles, 2018, the kind of morning where dreams either soar or shatter in the competitive world of entertainment. In a high-rise building overlooking the sprawling city, a young actress named Victoria Taylor sat in a waiting room, her hands trembling slightly as she held her script. She'd been to countless auditions before, but this one felt different. The role could be her big break, a supporting character in an upcoming major studio production alongside Scarlett Johansson herself. What Victoria didn't know was that in the adjacent room, an intense discussion was taking place between Scarlett Johansson and Alexander Thompson, one of Hollywood's most notorious yet powerful directors. Thompson had a reputation that preceded him, brilliant behind the camera, but with a darkness that had been whispered about in industry circles for years. His last 3 films had grossed over $1 billion combined, making him seemingly untouchable in the industry. Scarlett, who had signed on as both lead actress and executive producer, was already having doubts about some of his methods. The morning had started normally enough. Scarlett had arrived early to sit in on auditions, something she insisted on as part of her producer role. She believed in creating safe spaces for new talent, having experienced her own share of challenges when she was younger. But something in Thompson's behavior had been off from the start. The way he looked at the headshots, making comments that had nothing to do with acting ability. The way he insisted on private callbacks without other casting directors present. Emma Wilson, the casting assistant who had been working in Hollywood for over a decade, had seen it all before. She'd watched Thompson's behavior all morning with growing concern, taking mental notes of every inappropriate comment, every lingering look. She'd seen directors like him come and go, but Thompson was different. He had the power to make or break careers, and he knew it. Victoria Taylor was 23, fresh out of drama school, with nothing but talent and determination to her name. She'd worked 3 jobs to afford her small studio apartment in Los Angeles, spending every free moment at auditions and acting workshops. Her best friend, Sophia Martinez, had warned her about Thompson's reputation, but Victoria had convinced herself that the opportunity was worth the risk. After all, this wasn't just any production. This was a film with Scarlett Johansson, an actress known for her strong stance on women's rights in the industry. The tension in the building had been building all morning. James Anderson, the production's veteran casting director, had tried to maintain some semblance of professionalism, but Thompson had systematically undermined his authority at every turn. "I know what I'm looking for," Thompson would say, his tone leaving no room for discussion. "And I know how to get the best performances out of young talent." Earlier that morning, Charlotte Davis, a promising young actress with several indie films under her belt, had left the audition room in tears. Thompson had suggested she dress more appropriately for the role next time, his eyes roaming over her conservative outfit with disapproval. When James Anderson had objected to the comment, Thompson had simply smiled and said, "This is how stars are made, James. You've been in this business long enough to know that." Then there was Olivia Garcia, who'd auditioned just before Victoria. Thompson had been particularly interested in her, suggesting a private coaching session to help her unlock her full potential. The implications were clear, and the look of discomfort on Olivia's face had said everything. She'd politely declined and left quickly, passing Victoria in the hallway with a warning look that spoke volumes. Benjamin White, the production's assistant. Director had been documenting everything quietly from his corner of the room. He'd seen Thompson's behavior escalate over the years, but had felt powerless to stop it. Now, with Scarlett Johansson on board as a producer, he hoped things might finally change. The atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically when Victoria walked in. Thompson's demeanor changed instantly, the same predatory gleam in his eyes that had appeared with previous young actresses. But this time, something was different. This time, Scarlett Johansson was done being a silent observer. Victoria stood in the center of the room, her resume trembling slightly in her hands. The space felt smaller than it was, with Thompson's presence seeming to fill every corner. The casting room at Paramount Studios had seen countless auditions over the years, but none quite like what was about to unfold. Victoria Taylor, Thompson read from her resume, drawing out each syllable in a way that made her skin crawl. Tell me, Victoria, how badly do you want this role? Before Victoria could answer, Scarlett shifted in her chair, her eyes narrowing. She'd seen this pattern before, the way Thompson would start by making actresses feel small, desperate, before offering them a chance at special consideration. The room was thick with tension. Emma Wilson held her breath, her pen poised over her notepad. James Anderson straightened in his chair, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Benjamin White's hand tightened around his coffee cup. Thompson continued, either oblivious to or deliberately ignoring the changing dynamics in the room. You know, Victoria, this industry is all about connections. The right mentor can make all the difference. I've helped many young actresses find their way to the top. Victoria's heart raced. This was her dream role, her big chance, but something felt terribly wrong. She glanced at Scarlett, whose face had become a mask of controlled anger. I actually have a private studio where I coach promising talent, Thompson continued, leaning forward in his chair. We could set up a session for this evening, just you and me, really dig deep into the character. The words hung in the air for a moment, heavy with implication. And that's when it happened. The moment that would become legendary in Hollywood. Circles, the moment when one of the industry's biggest stars decided enough was enough. But before we reveal Scarlett's explosive intervention, let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. This is a story about power, courage, and standing up against abuse in the entertainment industry, and it's one that needs to be heard around the world. Victoria stood there, script in hand, unaware that she was about to become part of a watershed moment in Hollywood history. Thompson leaned forward in his chair, that familiar predatory smile playing on his lips as he prepared to speak again. But before he could open his mouth, Scarlett Johansson made her move, a move that would demonstrate exactly how a powerful woman uses her influence to protect others. Little did Thompson know, but his reign of terror in Hollywood was about to come to an explosive end. And Victoria Taylor? She was about to learn that sometimes your guardian angel comes in the form of a Hollywood superstar who's had enough of the industry's darkest secrets. Behind the scenes, other actresses like Ava Thompson and Grace Miller had already begun sharing their stories with industry insiders. The powder keg was primed, and Scarlett's next words would be the spark that would ignite a firestorm of change in Hollywood. The next few minutes would not only change Victoria's life, but would send shockwaves through the entertainment industry that would be felt for years to come. As Thompson prepared to continue his predatory routine, Scarlett Johansson took a deep breath, ready to unleash the kind of performance that no camera would ever capture, but one that would become the stuff of Hollywood legend. Stay tuned for Chapter 2, where we'll reveal exactly how Scarlett Johansson turned the tables on one of Hollywood's most powerful predators, and how a young actress's ordinary audition became the catalyst for extraordinary change in the entertainment industry. The tension in the casting room had reached its breaking point. Victoria Taylor stood frozen in place, the script pages crackling softly in her trembling hands as Alexander Thompson rose from his chair with the practiced smoothness of a predator approaching its prey. But before he could take a single step, Scarlett Johansson's voice cut through the air like a steel blade. "Sit down, Alex." The command in her tone was unmistakable. The room fell into a silence so complete you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Emma Wilson, the casting assistant, had stopped typing, her fingers hovering over her keyboard as she held her breath. Thompson turned, a flash of annoyance crossing his face. "Scarlett, please, I know what I'm doing. This is how stars are made." "No," Scarlett replied, standing up slowly. "This is how predators operate, and it ends today." She moved to stand between Thompson and Victoria, her presence transforming from Hollywood star to protective warrior in an instant. James Anderson, the casting director, exchanged glances with Benjamin White, the assistant director. They'd both been waiting for someone with enough power to finally challenge Thompson's behavior, and that moment had arrived. "Victoria," Scarlett said, not taking her eyes off Thompson, "please wait outside with Emma. This won't take long." Her voice was gentle but firm, leaving no room for argument. As Victoria and Emma left the room, they passed by Sofia Martinez and Olivia Garcia in the hallway, both still shaken from their own auditions earlier that morning. The four women huddled together, their ears pressed to the door as history began to unfold inside. "You're making a mistake, Scarlett," Thompson said, his charm evaporating like morning dew under a harsh sun. "This is how the industry works. You know that. Everyone knows that. No, Alex, this is how you work. And I've spent the last 3 weeks documenting every single instance of your special coaching sessions." Scarlett pulled out her phone, scrolling through what appeared to be an extensive list. "Lily Anderson, who quit acting after your private audition last year. Charlotte Davis, who you threatened to blacklist when she refused your advances. And now, Victoria Taylor." Thompson's face darkened. "You have no proof of anything, just accusations from failed actresses who couldn't handle the pressure of the industry." That's when Benjamin White stepped forward, pulling out a small recorder from his pocket. "Actually, we have everything, Alex. Every conversation, every inappropriate comment, every threat." His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. "I've been recording you for months." The color drained from Thompson's face. In the corner, James Anderson was already on the phone with the studio executives, his voice low but urgent. Outside, more actresses had gathered. Ava Thompson, Grace Miller, and Hannah Wilson, all previous victims of Thompson's behavior, had arrived after receiving text messages from Emma about what was unfolding. Back inside the room, Thompson's famous temper finally erupted. "You can't do this to me," he shouted, taking a threatening step towards Scarlett. "Do you know who I am? I've made studios billions. I've created stars." "No," Scarlett replied calmly, not backing down an inch. "You've exploited young women and hidden behind your success to avoid consequences. But here's what's going to happen. Now." She pulled out a document from her bag. "This is your resignation letter citing creative differences. You're going to sign it right now. If you don't, tomorrow morning every major news outlet in Hollywood will receive documented evidence of your behavior, including testimonies from over 30 actresses." Thompson laughed, but there was a note of desperation in it. "You're bluffing. No one will believe them. It's my word against theirs." "Actually," came a new voice from the doorway. Isabella Martinez, one of Hollywood's top entertainment lawyers, stepped into the room. "It's your word against evidence collected by a team of private investigators, sworn testimonies from multiple witnesses, and audio recordings spanning 3 years. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Security guards Mason Clark and Noah Rodriguez arrived to escort Thompson from the building. Studio executives were called. Statements were prepared. But most importantly, in the hallway outside, something remarkable was happening. Victoria Taylor, still processing what had just occurred, found herself surrounded by a group of women who understood exactly what she'd been through. Olivia Garcia shared her own story of a previous encounter with Thompson. Sofia Martinez admitted she'd nearly quit acting after a similar experience with another director. Scarlett emerged from the casting room, looking both exhausted and energized. The group of actresses fell silent as she approached. "Ladies," she said, addressing them all but focusing on Victoria, "what happened today isn't the end, it's the beginning. For too long, this industry has protected people like Thompson, forcing young actresses to choose between their dignity and their dreams. That stops now." She turned to Emma Wilson. "Emma, call every actress who's auditioned for Thompson in the past month. Tell them we're having new auditions with a new director." She smiled. "Tell them Amelia Taylor will be directing. She's been waiting for an opportunity like this." The ripple effects of that morning would be felt throughout Hollywood for years to come. By the end of the day, 3 other prominent directors had resigned suddenly, fearing their own behavior would be exposed. Studio executives across town were hastily calling meetings about updating harassment policies. But the real change was happening in that hallway, where actresses who had felt alone in their struggles were finally finding their collective voice. Victoria Taylor, who had walked in that morning hoping for a small role in a big film, had instead become part of something much more significant. 1 week later, in a conference room at the studio, Scarlett sat with Victoria, Emma, and a group of other actresses who had been affected by Thompson's behavior. They were launching the Safe Set Initiative, a program designed to protect upcoming actresses and create accountability in the industry. "You know," Scarlett said, looking around the room, "Thompson was right about one thing. This is how stars are made. Not through exploitation and abuse, but through courage, support, and standing up for what's right." Victoria, who had been cast in the film with a larger role than she'd originally auditioned for, looked at the women around her. Sofia Martinez was discussing policy changes with Isabella Martinez. Olivia Garcia was sharing her story with a reporter from a major entertainment magazine. Emma Wilson was coordinating with other casting directors to implement new safety protocols. The story of what happened that day would inspire countless others to come forward, not just in Hollywood, but in industries across the world. Alexander Thompson's career was over, but more importantly, the careers of countless talented women were just beginning. As news of the confrontation spread throughout Hollywood, more actresses began sharing their own stories. Zoe Anderson, a veteran actress who had worked with Thompson early in her career, came forward with documentation of similar behavior from 15 years ago. Lucy Thompson, no relation to Alexander, revealed she had left acting entirely after an encounter with him at the beginning of her career. The Safe Set Initiative, born from that dramatic morning, would go on to become a model for industry reform. Victoria Taylor, initially worried that being part of the scandal would hurt her career, instead found herself celebrated for her part in breaking the silence. 3 months later, as filming began on the project, now titled Breaking Silence, the set was different from any other in Hollywood. With Amelia Taylor directing, Scarlett Johansson producing and starring, and a crew that was 50% female, it represented the change that had been long overdue in the industry. The final scene of that morning played out exactly as it should. Thompson, his power stripped away, was escorted from the building by security, passing by the very women he had tried to exploit. His last view of the studio was of Scarlett Johansson standing with Victoria Taylor and a group of actresses, all of them watching as his career quite literally walked out the door. But this story isn't just about one predator's downfall. It's about the moment when one of Hollywood's most powerful actresses used her influence not for personal gain, but to protect those who needed protection. It's about how courage, when witnessed, becomes contagious. And most importantly, it's about how change happens, not through grand gestures alone, but through the collective actions of people who decide enough is enough. The Hollywood sign still stands overlooking the city, but after that day, it cast a different shadow. For aspiring actresses like Victoria Taylor, it no longer represented a dream that might require compromising their integrity. Instead, it became a symbol of an industry slowly but surely learning to protect its own. As Scarlett would later say in an interview about that day, "Sometimes the most important role we play isn't in front of the camera. It's standing up for what's right, even when, especially when, it's difficult." Before we move on to Chapter 3, where we'll explore the aftermath and industry-wide changes that followed, let us know in the comments if you or someone you know has ever had to stand up against abuse of power. Your stories matter, and they're part of this larger narrative of change. Remember, what happened that day in the casting room wasn't just about Hollywood. It was about the moment when people with power chose to use it to protect others, when victims found their voice, and when an industry finally began to acknowledge that talent shouldn't come with a price tag of abuse. The story of what happened in that casting room spread through Hollywood faster than a California wildfire. Within 48 hours of Alexander Thompson's dramatic exit, the entertainment industry was experiencing what many would later call its moment of reckoning. But the real changes were just beginning to unfold. 1 week after the confrontation, in the executive boardroom of Paramount Studios, Scarlett Johansson sat at the head of a table surrounded by some of the most powerful women in Hollywood. Victoria Taylor, now a symbol of the changing tide, sat to her right. Emma Wilson, the former casting assistant who had documented Thompson's behavior, was there too, along with Isabella Martinez, the entertainment lawyer who had helped build the case against Thompson. "Gentlemen," Scarlett addressed the studio, executives who filled the other side of the table, "what happened last week wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a systemic problem, and we're here to present our solution." That solution would become known as the Safe Set Protocol, a comprehensive set of guidelines and accountability measures that would revolutionize how Hollywood operated. But implementing it would prove to be a battle all its own. William Anderson, one of the older executives, leaned forward with a practiced smile. "While we appreciate your concern, Ms. Johansson, changing established industry practices could be costly." That's when Olivia Garcia, who had recently been appointed to the Screen Actors Guild's Safety Committee, spoke up. "More costly than the 6 lawsuits currently being filed against directors who followed Thompson's example. More costly than the talent we lose every year to abuse and harassment." The room fell silent. In the corner, Charlotte Davis, now working as an advocate for industry reform, was taking detailed notes. The documentation of these meetings would later become part of a landmark study on institutional change in entertainment. The ripple effects were spreading beyond Hollywood. Grace Miller, who had left acting years ago after an encounter with Thompson, had started a support group that was quickly growing into a national network. Sophia Martinez was developing a mentorship program for young actresses, ensuring they had guidance and protection as they navigated the industry. But not everyone was celebrating these changes. 3 days after the Thompson incident, Sebastian Harris, another high-profile director known for his intense directing style, had given an interview defending the old ways of Hollywood. The backlash was swift and severe. "You know what happened to Harris after that interview?" Emma Wilson would later recall in a documentary about the events. "Every A-list actress in Hollywood refused to work with him. Every single one. That's When the industry really started to understand, the power dynamic had shifted. The production of Breaking Silence, the film that had started it all, was becoming a model for the new Hollywood. Under director Amelia Taylor's leadership, the set was running with a level of professionalism and respect that many crew members had never experienced before. Victoria Taylor, whose role had been expanded to reflect her character's journey of finding her voice, found herself working alongside actresses she had idolized. The amazing thing, she would later tell Entertainment Weekly, wasn't just that we were making a great film, it was that we were proving you could make great art without compromising anyone's dignity. But the real test came 3 months after Thompson's departure, when the first round of industry-wide safe set protocol implementation began. Hannah Wilson, now heading the compliance team, faced resistance from several major studios. "Change doesn't happen overnight," Scarlett addressed a group of young actresses at a SAG-AFTRA meeting, "but it does happen when we stand together and refuse to back down." The strength of that unity was tested when Lucas Thompson, no relation to Alexander, a powerful producer, attempted to discredit the movement by claiming it was hysteria and overreaction. His comments might have gained traction in the old Hollywood, but times had changed. Ava Rodriguez, a rising star who had worked with Lucas Thompson, came forward with her own story. She was supported by Lily Anderson, Madison Clark, and Isabella White, all respected names in the industry. Within days, Lucas Thompson found himself facing the same fate as his namesake. The Johansson effect, as the media dubbed it, was spreading to other industries. Tech companies, advertising agencies, and even Wall Street firms were studying the safe set protocol, adapting its principles for their own environments. 6 months after the confrontation in the casting room, Scarlett and Victoria stood on stage. At the Women in Film Annual Gala, the audience was filled with faces both familiar and new, survivors, advocates, and champions of change. "When I walked into that audition room," Victoria addressed the crowd, her voice steady and strong, "I thought I was just trying to get a part in a movie. I didn't know I was walking into a moment that would change not just my life, but the lives of countless others." The statistics spoke for themselves. Reports of harassment in the industry had dropped by 60%. More importantly, when incidents were reported, they were being taken seriously and addressed immediately. The old guard's protests about "this is how things are done" were being drowned out by a new chorus of voices demanding better. Benjamin White, who had secretly recorded Thompson's behavior, had been promoted to head of production safety at his studio. His first act was to implement a comprehensive reporting system that protected whistleblowers. "The key," he explained in an industry panel, "is making sure people feel safe coming forward." Emma Wilson's detailed documentation of Thompson's behavior had become a template for identifying and addressing abuse of power. She worked with Sofia Martinez to develop training programs for casting directors and assistants, teaching them how to recognize and respond to inappropriate behavior. The Breaking Silence set became a case study in successful industry reform. Amelia Taylor's directing style proved that creativity didn't require cruelty, and that respect and professionalism could coexist with artistic vision. 1 year after the confrontation, Scarlett Johansson hosted a reunion of sorts. In a private dining room at Chateau Marmont, she gathered with the women who had been part of that pivotal day. Victoria Taylor, now starring in her own series. Emma Wilson, running her own casting agency with a zero-tolerance policy for harassment. Olivia Garcia, recently elected to the SAG-AFTRA board. "Look around this room," Scarlett said, raising her glass. "Every one of you chose courage over silence. Every one of you helped create change that will protect generations of artists to come." The conversation turned to Alexander Thompson. He had tried to make a comeback 6 months after the incident, attempting to direct a small, independent film under a pseudonym. But the industry had changed. His old tactics no longer worked. His power was gone. But this story isn't about Thompson's fall. It's about the rise of a new Hollywood, one built on respect, professionalism, and the understanding that talent should never have to compromise dignity for opportunity. As the evening wound down, Victoria shared something that captured the essence of everything that had changed. "Last week," she said, "a young actress came up to me after an audition. She told me she'd never felt safer or more respected in a casting room. That's when I knew we didn't just change an industry, we changed lives." The Safe Set Protocol is now standard practice in studios across Hollywood. The support network that began in that hallway has grown into a nationwide organization. The mentorship program Sofia Martinez started has helped hundreds of young actresses navigate the industry safely. But perhaps the most significant change isn't in the policies or protocols. It's in the culture itself. The understanding that power comes with responsibility, that talent deserves respect, and that no one should have to choose between their dreams and their dignity. As we wrap up this chapter of our story, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you seen similar changes in your industry? Have you been part of making those changes happen? Your stories are part of this larger narrative of transformation. Remember, what happened that day in the casting room wasn't just about one predator being stopped. It was about an entire industry learning to protect its own, about powerful people choosing to use their influence for good, and about the courage it takes to stand up and say, enough. The Hollywood sign still stands above Los Angeles, but it shines brighter now, representing not just dreams of stardom, but promises of safety, respect, and dignity for all who dare to chase those dreams. 5 years after the day that changed Hollywood forever, the impact of what became known as the Thompson incident continues to reshape the entertainment industry. But to truly understand the legacy of that moment, we need to look at where our key players are now and how their courage inspired a movement that reached far beyond the hills of Hollywood. Victoria Taylor sits in her trailer on the set of her latest project, a biographical film about women's rights activists that she's not just starring in, but producing. Through the window, she can see Isabella Martinez, now one of Hollywood's most respected directors, setting up the next shot. The industry they work in today bears little resemblance to the one they knew 5 years ago. Sometimes I think about that morning, Victoria shares during a recent interview with Entertainment Weekly. I was just a scared young actress clutching a script. Now I'm running my own production company with a mission to tell women's stories. Life has a way of coming full circle. That production company, Phoenix Rising Productions, was founded by Victoria and Sofia Martinez 2 years after the Thompson incident. Their first project? A documentary series featuring the stories of survivors who found their voice in the wake of Hollywood's reformation. The series won 3 Emmy Awards and sparked similar movements in film industries around the world. Emma Wilson, who documented Thompson's behavior as a casting assistant, has revolutionized the casting process in Hollywood. Her company, Safecast Productions, now handles casting for major studios with a protocol that prioritizes both talent and safety. We prove every day that you can discover amazing talent without compromising anyone's dignity, she explains. But perhaps the most significant change came from Scarlett Johansson herself. The Safe Set initiative she launched has evolved into the Industry Safety Alliance, ISA, a powerful organization that oversees professional conduct across entertainment sectors. With chapters in every major filming location worldwide, the ISA has become the gold standard for workplace safety in creative industries. What happened that day with Thompson wasn't just about stopping one predator, Scarlett reflected during the ISA's 5th anniversary gala. It was about changing the entire culture of an industry that had normalized abuse of power. We didn't Just want to remove the bad apples. We wanted to replant the whole orchard. The ripple effects touched lives far beyond Hollywood. Grace Anderson, who had left acting years before due to Thompson's behavior, returned to the industry as an acting coach specializing in empowerment techniques. Her workshops help young performers recognize their worth beyond their talent. Benjamin White's secret recordings of Thompson's behavior became the foundation for a comprehensive training program now mandatory for all industry professionals. Recognition and response. Maintaining professional boundaries in entertainment is taught in film schools across the country. Oliver Thompson, no relation to Alexander, a young director who entered the industry post-Reformation, represents the new generation of filmmakers. We learned about the Thompson incident in film school, he says. It's a reminder that great art doesn't require toxicity. Some of the most powerful scenes in cinema history have been created in environments of mutual respect. The Breaking silence film, which started it all, became more than just another movie. Under Amelia Taylor's direction, it evolved into a powerful statement about finding one's voice. The film won multiple Academy Awards, but its real victory was in the conversations it started. Scarlett Davis, who had nearly quit acting after her encounter with Thompson, now heads the Performers Protection Program at SAG-AFTRA. Every time a young actor comes to me with a concern and knows they'll be heard, she says, I think about how far we've come. But what about Alexander Thompson himself? After his attempted comeback failed, he disappeared from public view. Recent reports suggest he's living in a small town in Montana, writing a memoir that no publisher will touch. His legacy serves as a cautionary tale in industry seminars about power and responsibility. The physical changes in Hollywood are visible too. The old casting building where the confrontation took place has been renovated and renamed the Safe Space Center, housing organizations dedicated to protecting performers' rights. The walls that once witnessed abuse now echo with stories of empowerment. Hannah Wilson, who was just starting her acting career when the Thompson incident occurred, recently won an Oscar for her role in a film about workplace harassment. In her acceptance speech, she thanked Scarlett Johansson and Victoria Taylor for making the industry safe enough for stories like these to be told. The Safe Set protocol has been adopted by film industries in over 40 countries. Sophia Martinez frequently travels internationally, helping implement these protection measures in emerging film markets. The language of safety and respect is universal, she observes. Even the way Hollywood tells stories has changed. Scripts featuring exploitative content are scrutinized more carefully. Writers like Ava Thompson, again, no relation, are creating powerful narratives that don't rely on gratuitous scenes or the exploitation of vulnerable characters. Isabella White, who was one of Thompson's first victims 15 years ago, finally returned to acting in a critically acclaimed series about survivors reclaiming their power. The industry that drove me away, she says, has become the industry that helped me heal. The annual Safe Set Awards, established 3 years after the incident, recognize productions that maintain the highest standards of professional conduct while creating outstanding content. The trophy, designed by Victoria Taylor, features a phoenix rising, a symbol of transformation and renewal. Olivia Garcia, who witnessed Thompson's last day of power, now runs a mentorship program pairing established actresses with newcomers. The cycle of abuse ended, she explains, and a cycle of support began. That's how real change sustains itself. But perhaps the most powerful testament to change comes from the next generation. Lucy Martinez, a first-year student at USC Film School, recently wrote her thesis on the transformation of Hollywood's power dynamics. We study the Thompson incident not just as history, she says, but as a blueprint for maintaining integrity in the face of power. The impact extends beyond entertainment. Corporate America has adopted modified versions of the Safe Set protocol. Tech startups, advertising agencies, and even law firms have implemented similar protection measures. The ripple effect continues to spread. Scarlett Johansson, reflecting on the 5th anniversary of that pivotal day, summed it up perfectly. Change happens when people with power choose to use it to protect others. But lasting change happens when that choice becomes so normalized that abuse of power becomes the anomaly, not the expectation. As we conclude this series, we ask you, our viewers, how has the culture in your industry changed over the past 5 years? Have you seen similar transformations? Share your stories in the comments below. The Hollywood sign still stands proud against the California sky, but its meaning has evolved. For aspiring artists like Victoria Taylor was 5 years ago, it no longer represents a dream that might require compromise. Instead, it stands as a beacon of hope, a symbol of an industry that learned to protect its dreamers while nurturing their dreams. And somewhere in that same casting building where it all began, another young actress is auditioning today. But she walks into a room where she knows she'll be treated with respect, where her talent matters more than her vulnerability, and where her dreams don't come with a price tag of dignity. That's the real legacy of the Thompson incident. Not just the fall of one predator, but the rise of an industry that finally understood that its greatest productions aren't the ones captured on film, but the ones that transform lives behind the scenes. Remember, every industry has its Thompson moment, waiting to happen. The only question is, who will be brave enough to stand up and say, enough? Because as this story proves, sometimes all it takes is one voice, one moment of courage to change everything. Thank you for joining us for this 4-part series on how Hollywood found its conscience. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. This video with anyone who needs to hear that change is possible when people stand together for what's right.